Well, I'm still on my video making trip, going nowhere, driving wherever the road takes me. And so this is the next thing that I am to continue with a loose train of thought, and that was, we ended off on the last video about the idea of a pre-start syndrome, that hesitancy that you get of starting something. And it's not that I have a great memory for names and who said what and who did this and who did that, but I do remember reading the accounts of more than one person who is very successful at what they do and yet cannot bring themselves to begin. And so it's a huge problem, but the concept for how you deal with it runs clearly through all of them. So it doesn't matter whether you're learning the trombone, which I did, and you are, how do you get any better at doing anything? It doesn't matter what it is. It can be learning the flute, it can be learning the trombone, it can be learning how to drive, it can be anything at all. It can be starting a journey. And that's really what we're talking about in anything, is starting a journey. Because if you are going to learn something new, you are starting a new adventure. This is a new thing that you are doing. Now what is the one thing that runs through when you do anything? And I have an answer to that from personal experience. When I wanted, just prior to coming to the Philippines and meeting my wife and embarking on this mission to help, I wanted to write. I'm doing that now, in effect, but now I'm speaking. This is the spoken word, but of course it starts off in the head almost as the written word. So, but this is how I started. I wanted to write, and I remember advising someone else about how to get to where I was then, and I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if someone that was famous, who had gone through all of the challenges and reached success, what would they tell me? So I came across a site. This is in the early days of course, of the... So it's in the early days. I'm attending to some challenges of... I'm on the Philippine roads, okay, so have patience with me. And a truck just passed that was very, very close. Well, anyway, I found online a site that it's probably not allowed but now, but on Facebook I found someone who had discovered and written down all of the addresses of a ton of famous people, and in there were many writers. So I chose, out of it, I think four writers, and I wrote to them all. Now the thing is, I've written to people who are famous before, as perhaps we have all done now that we are in an internet situation, right? But back then it wasn't so easy, it wasn't so well known. People would say, oh, he'll never write back to you. I remember reading a book that had been written by a professor at a prestigious university in California, and I wrote to him. It doesn't matter what I said now, but he wrote back a very nice letter, and he was just very courteous and polite and pleasant, and he took the time to write back to me. So back to my question. The question that I wrote to these 4 very successful people, I said, in the light of all of the challenges that you have overcome and the success that you have now achieved and enjoy, is there one thing that you wish someone had told you, that you said to yourself, why didn't somebody tell me that before? If I had known that before, it would have made life better and easier for me. So I wrote and I sent my letters off, my messages, I sent them off. Now, 2 didn't bother to answer me, but 2 did. Now, the first one, which is important, but is not the point of what I'm trying to tell you, said the most important thing that I wish that I had known before was to be very, very careful about the agent that you get, because if you get a bad agent, it's like a bad marriage, and they will lead you wrong and they'll rip you off for money. So, a bad experience. Now, the next one was a man who, I should remember his name, but what I do remember is that he was a successful writer, contributor, because there's not on any of these famous, the well-known successful TV shows, they don't have just one writer. They could have half a dozen writers. So he was one of the acclaimed writers on the X-Files. And I wrote to him and I said, in view, is there one thing that you wish that you had known, that you sometimes think to yourself, what the heck, why didn't somebody tell me that? I'm waiting for someone to cross, but she's afraid because nobody else will stop. Okay, she's over. It's a pedestrian crossing, okay? So, this guy wrote back to me and he said, easy question. It's an easy question. Persistence. That's what it takes. Given that you have the ability, persistence is the next absolutely necessary thing that you must have. He said, I know other writers who have just as much talent as I do, but they gave up. He said, if you give up, how can you be successful? Success is about being persistent. It's about doing the thing and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again until somebody says, oh, for God's sake, give this man a chance or something. I remember Sylvester Stallone. Somebody asked him, this is when he had written Rocky. I read the book, actually. I read the book of the story of Rocky, and it was lousy writing to my mind. I don't know whether Stallone wrote that, but I thought, well, this is not terribly great story, but not terribly written. Well, somebody asked him, with all of that, because he earned hundreds of millions of dollars, because instead of having a famous celebrity movie star do the part of Rocky, he said, I want to do it myself, and I'm not going to sell you the story. You can't make the film without me. And finally, somebody, some movie star, some movie company who could see that it was a successful, potentially successful movie, and they paid him, I think it was, the account I read was that he made a fee of $30,000, which the fee before that he had been offered was $300,000, and he'd already sold his dog. So he said, people, back to the Back to the lesson. He's being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, so what's the secret? So he said, I get lots of people asking me this question. He said, they ask me, what's the secret? He said, what can I tell you? There is no secret. He said, you try, and you try, and you try, and you try again. If that's the secret, that's it. Persistence. So once you have learned to handle starting, persistence is the next thing. So if when you go into the workshop, as I've already explained, I would go into my workshop studio and I'd sweep the floor. Well, if that works, then the next day when you don't want to go into the studio to do whatever it is you do, you pick up the broom and you sweep the place out again. Whatever it was that got... When I was learning to play the trombone, I finally went to the Military School of Music in Twickenham, and I had this incredible teacher who was the principal trombone of the BBC Symphony Orchestra, Mr. Teskey, who for me was my music hero. He had perfect pitch. He could sit there at the window, looking out of the window, and he knew what position I was playing something in. He'd say, no, don't play the D in first position. It's usually a little bit flat. If you can't possibly play it in fourth, then do it. So I got there. I'm having trouble. I hadn't learned the secret, and yet I want to be a great trombone player. I'm looking back at that time, I want to be a great trombone player. And I can't get my instrument out of the case to practice. You know, it's a struggle. It's a huge struggle of willpower, or lack of it. And so what I started to do was just open the case. As simple and basic as going to the trombone case and putting it back then. We had a bed space and a locker, and that was our life. That was our accommodation. And I went, put the instrument on the bed, opened it and looked at it, and then the next small thing that I could fool myself with was open the thing, take the instrument out and blow one note. That's all you have to do, Terence, is blow one gosh darn note. And as soon as I blew one note, I got it. And then I would be able to do 2 or 3 hours practice and love it, and be in complete confusion as to why it had been so difficult. And that was one of the things that I read in many years later of an artist who was very successful in doing particular types of painting. And she said, I cannot understand why it's so difficult to bring myself into the studio and do what I love doing as soon as I start. As soon as the paintbrush hits the canvas, I'm away, and I can spend hours. I have to be dragged out of the studio to go to sleep. So that's where we're at right now, and I am trying, as I said, to make these videos so that they're of some help, and so that the common thread through them all is the ability to be successful at whatever you do. And I'm not talking about that you've got to be famous. That's nothing to do with success. For some people who, I don't know, who does say foot massages, success for them is that they've got people queuing at the door to have their feet massaged. That would be success for them. So I will continue on the next video. Thank you for watching.